Hey, everybody, welcome to Finding Your Fulfillment Fit. We're really excited that you chose to join us today. We have a lot in store for you, and I'm really excited about the group of people that we have. Appreciate you taking some time to come through and share your afternoon with us. Before we get started, one of the things that we wanted to touch on was a pattern that we've been seeing over and over again. And that is that brands often go through painful transitions, either into their first 3PL or from one to the next after just a year or two of time with them. What we see is rarely incompetence on the provider side. More often, it's just because the partnership wasn't in the right place and it wasn't the right fit to begin with. So there are 3PLs that are built for every single different scenario, just like there's restaurants for every single different type of taste. And so maybe there was an understanding that this could be good, and when the details got there, it doesn't always fit. But the common theme that we go through and that we understand often is that evaluation should uncover those issues very early. And with that, it needs to go much deeper than cost. And that's really what we're going to focus on today, because fulfillment's one of the most important decisions that a brand is going to make as it scales. It directly impacts the customer experience, operational complexity, and the cost structure of both yourself and the fulfillment provider. But despite how important this decision is, many brands still approach it transactionally and with a let's get it done approach. And that focuses very heavily on speed and on rates. And oftentimes that covers up or doesn't help uncover some of the other pieces that are just as important, if not more important, from a qualitative perspective. So with that said, we're going to talk about how we can find something that's useful and repeatable as you approach those partnerships, as you look for new fulfillment providers or evaluate the fulfillment provider that you're currently with, and that's fit. We like to think of it as a framework. It's a two-step process that sets up the framework for us. The first one is making sure that you're talking with the right providers. And we have some people here with a lot of experience about that will go into it. And then we have the second step, which is going deeper to determine whether the partnership with those providers you're speaking with is the right fit or not. And we have people with a lot of experience that will speak through that as well. And then the last part is that it's important to understand that while you're evaluating them, great providers are evaluating you back through a similar lens. And so it's helpful to understand what it is that they're looking for and how you can position yourself as a shipper of choice. And we're lucky enough to have a fulfillment provider with us today that can help give some insight to that. So with that, why don't we introduce our panelists? So I'll start with myself. I'm Joe McIntyre. I'm the general manager of Slotted. We are a software solution that's put together strictly to help in this process, bringing structure, clarity to the fulfillment decision-making, not just with who should you talk to, but on the important step of how do you determine are all the pieces correct and how do you go through it without having to die in spreadsheets. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more, or if you have questions, we can talk about that afterwards, but I'll kick it over to Majeed.
Yeah, so I'm Majeed, I'm with Shipware, and I'm the one who dies in the spreadsheets oftentimes. So really what Shipware does is we work with brands who don't necessarily have the bandwidth to go through an RFP and fulfillment provider evaluation themselves. So we run that RFP for them. Probably do 80 to 90% of the work in kind of sourcing, evaluating, and kind of giving that feedback back to providers so they can find the right fit for their brand for the next 3, hopefully longer years with a new fulfillment provider.
Awesome. My name's Ryan Marine. I'm the director of sales here at Stag. I've been here for 5.5 years. And I think one of the things I've really enjoyed about being here is I've been on a lot of sides of the coin here at Stag, both on the pricing side, the solutioning side, and operations and technology, and then back on the sales side. So Stag Fulfillment, we're a traditional pick, pack, ship for parcel. But we also assist with LTL and FTL moves on the outbound side and value-added services with returns and kitting. So again, just excited to be here and be part of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks. And Joe, thanks for having me. Matt Hertz, the CEO and founder of Third Person. Third Person is a platform that helps e-commerce brands discover and connect with 3PLs who are qualified to support them. So obviously this will be a very relevant conversation. Very good partners with Ryan and this team at Stag. They've been successful with a handful of brands who have gone through our process. Nice to meet another Nashvilleian, Majeed. We will soon meet in person. And Joe, I think incredibly highly of Joe and what they're building at Slotted. It's a very much a complementary technology or software to what we're building at Third Person. So glad to also call them partners and friends of ours.
Appreciate the kind words on that. Majeed, Ryan, Matt, thank you again for participating with us today. I think as I think through the ecosystem and people who have been there and done the parts of the framework that we're going to talk about and really understand what that looks like, a real depth of knowledge that I want to make sure we get in front of the group. So with that, let's start to move into into the deep end of finding fulfillment. And so as I mentioned on the front end, it's really the way we look at it Slotted is a two-part framework. How do you find that fulfillment fit, right? You have to talk with the right providers, and then you have to go deeper. And so when we're thinking about that, a lot of times brands are going to the market for the first time and they just don't know what they don't know. It's a muscle that they don't have to use very often. It may be the first time that a brand is going to work with a provider, but really when that happens, you're moving fast, you understand generally what you need to do, but ultimately it starts to boil down to cost. And there's a lot more beyond that, right? And the first part to making sure that you find that provider is, are we talking to the right people? And that's where Matt brings a lot of expertise. So do they have the capabilities we need? Do we have the expertise we need? And is there operational alignment? And then the second part of that is, as we go deeper, right, we're looking at cost because that's a component. But what about the team? What about the process? What about the trust and partnership? And does that overlap? And again, we'll hammer this home a lot as we go through. It must work in both directions. It cannot just be a one-way lens of the brand evaluating the provider that way. That means that the provider is great for the brand, but it comes back to the flip side, right? Is the brand also great for the provider? And that's where Ryan will give us a lot of insight today. So why fulfillment fit matters is a big piece that we talk about at Slotted. And the biggest part of that is remembering it's an equation, and it's a product, not a summation, right? It is capabilities, like we talked about, cost, team, and trust. And those are all multiplied by each other to find the fit. So if you have 0 in a multiplication equation like this, the whole thing is 0. So it's important that each one of those things has to be there, right? So cost is highly important, but it is one component that you need to look through in order to set yourself up for that deep fit, right? And when we think about poor fits between brands and 3PLs, everybody's got a story either on their own or of somebody that's a friend within the ecosystem where they felt like there was a bad fit that went on. And Ryan has the same, I'll speak on your behalf, Ryan, but you probably have the same stories within your side of the equation of poor fits that brands that came in to yourself or to others, right? And that manifests itself as broken off operations, missed customer expectations, strained partnerships, and expensive transitions. And the hardest part is most of the time, those things don't show up on the P&L for a brand. And so it starts to be a lagging indicator versus a leading indicator of health. So with that, let's talk about the first part. We have to start with the right providers. And I think this is where, Matt, I want to let you take over the conversation a bit. You spend a lot of time, you talked about it third person. You're hyper-focused on making sure that the brands are finding the right people to talk with, and you're with them early on in the search process. So when brands are looking for fulfillment partners, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about? And what are some of the mistakes that you see that they should avoid?
Yeah, sure. When I think about what brands should do or should look for, it really comes down to a few things. And I love this thought of like the equation. I've never really quite thought about it like a multiplication equation where if you have 1 0, it destroys the whole calculus or equation. But it's absolutely right. If you're going through a RFP searching for a new 3PL, and Ryan and his team at Red Stag would never do this, but if they said, "Hey guys, we would do it for free. We're going to do all your fulfillment for free, but we're only going to be 50% accurate, and it's going to take us a month to get out every order, but it's free." I don't think that brand would be too excited, right? Because yes, free is good or low cost is good, but the service needs to be there, right? The accountability needs to be there. So when I'm working with brands, helping them find the right 3PL, I think radical transparency is something that is so important and so overlooked. I mean, that to me is one of the critical signs or signals that a partnership will work. Is the 3PL, are they proactively sharing information, right? Question I always encourage brands to ask 3PLs when they're going through the process is to give me an example of a situation for a brand that looked and felt similar to me. Give me an example of a situation that didn't work out so well, and how did you triage that? How did you fix that? And if the 3PL doesn't have a good example, it means they just don't have good experience. So another analogy I use very often is that the relationship between a brand and a 3PL is like a marriage. right? There's over 10,000 3PLs in the United States. So it's a highly, highly fragmented market. Red Stag is one of those 10,000, but they've got 10,000 competitors, right? And what works for one 3PL in terms of fit may not be for another 3PL. So it's really important to understand the specific criteria or variables that you're looking for in a partner and make sure that those who you're soliciting, those who you're talking to match those criteria.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Matt. There was something that you said there that gets a chuckle, right? If we'll do it for free, but you got to wait a month, and most of the people on this call and most of the people that we've worked with historically will be like, "Yeah, absolutely not. That's just not going to work for me." But there are brands where that may work for them, right? Just because of what's there, and I think that's a really important lens to look through. Where just because it doesn't work for you in your conversation doesn't mean it's right or wrong or different, and same the other way. And I think that's the part that has been exciting for me over the past probably like 12 to 18 months. I'm seeing brands understanding that more often versus and coming with that education versus needing to learn some of that, which means the market's maturing and the market's moving, which is great. But that still is something important to think about. I was having a conversation with a brand earlier today, and we were talking about this, and they were pre-revenue. I was like, I mean, your favorite restaurant probably isn't the favorite restaurant of every single person you talk to either, because you may all like Italian food, but there's just something about it that's a little bit better or worse or different or whatever, or your first impression shapes it. So it's really important to think about that. And I like the way you talked about marriage. I think, Majeed, along these same the same lines, because where Matt and third person are hyper focused on that discovery piece, you also are doing that to an extent with the brands who are coming to you looking for a little bit more advisory and white glove work all the way through the process. What are some of the challenges that you see when you're having those initial conversations with brands? Are they, Matt hit the nail, there are 10,000 3PLs out there. Are they coming with ideas of who they want to talk to already? Or what does that discovery process start to look like when you're talking with someone, one of the brands that you work with, who's looking for a little bit deeper support beyond just who to talk to?
Yeah, so a lot of the brands that we work with, obviously, they've had conversations before, and your usual suspects who kind of show up whenever you type 3PL into Google are going to be the ones they talk to, right? We're talking, some of those big name brands who pay for the search engine optimization. But what I always talk to brands, we talk about the same thing. There's 10,000 different 3PLs out there. The bad news is it's hard to find the right fit. The good news is with 10,000 out there, there certainly is someone who is the right fit. So you just have to take the time to figure that out. And I think what brands struggle with and what we try and help with the most is almost every client that I've had. It's not so much they don't understand their product and the product profile. It's that they don't necessarily understand how a 3PL needs to see that product, how it needs to be reinterpreted. So that 3PL not just prices things correctly, but puts together the right team in advance so that you have the right members day one working on the product, right? Like I had a client recently who basically they have like, call it 80 to 100 different small mom and pop manufacturers. It's very like high quality cookware type of stuff. So we're talking like guys in Japan who've never heard of a barcode label, right? And that wasn't necessarily the need for a barcode label from the 3PL. 3PL needs it to process in and put it away. That mismatch of, hey, not all of our guys know what a barcode label is, was not properly communicated. So we worked it out. We went through the steps. We solved the problem. It's not, end of the world. But not knowing that in advance certainly hurt that relationship early on because it didn't have the right number of receiving people in place and the right team members in place. So it's just making sure there's no detail too small going through this evaluation process, and seeing how the 3PL will handle that is what's most important.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you brought up there with, as we go through and we evaluate it, there's a lot of this depth that we need to know. But sometimes you can get that analysis paralysis, right? And so kind of coming back to your side, Matt, like when you're ready to say, like, hey, I need to go find somebody, I want to understand who is out there for me to talk to. And you're at the very, very early stages. What are the bare minimum things you need to have? I think everybody probably knows this is my category, this is my orders, or my projected orders, whatever it may be. But what are one or two things that are maybe a step a little bit further that can really set you up to succeed? And maybe Ryan, this is a good opportunity for you to say that as well, of like, hey, it's okay if you don't have everything up front, but this is what really sets you apart. Either Matt or Ryan, go for it. Whoever wants to take it first, but I think that's probably an interesting path to go down.
Matt, I'll let you lead off.
Okay. Yeah, Joe, you're right. I mean, you certainly need to have, your package level, detail and item master and, understand what your growth rates are. And obviously your sales channels, integrations needed, kind of all that basic 101 stuff. I sort of call it like the first date stuff, right? When you go on a first date, where were you born and where did you go to school? And, how long have you been here? Just kind of like the kind of surface level stuff. Not to say that a PLD is surface level, because obviously it's important information, but on that second, third, and 10th date, you start to really kind of dig into, the nuts and bolts of, who you are as a brand, or I guess in that case, who you are as a person and what you're looking for. And I think, if you translate that to the fit question, or, how to find that right 3PL, unfortunately, I find that, I call this like the herd mentality or following the herd, where, just because a massive, well-known, or, maybe not massive, but, a mid-market, well-known 3PL that, Majeed said, if you Google like best warehouse near me, the top 3 that show up, although Red Stag's very good at marketing and SEO, so they might show up too. But putting Red Stag to the side, for a moment, a lot of people just, follow the herd. And just because, I'll pop into some Slack group and say, hey, who's the best warehouse in Chicago? And some high SKU apparel brand is having a good time working with this 3PL. But then my company is a, fragile cosmetics, brand, or a candle company, or a hot sauce company. And, they're doing 20,000 orders a month with 100,000 SKUs. And I'm doing, 500 orders a month with 20 SKUs, right? Like, very different model. And like, unlike, I think it was, Joe's example of, the restaurant, there's many Italian restaurants, they're all a little bit different. The flip side to that is, if you stay at the wrong hotel on a vacation, or a hotel that you don't love, or you go to the wrong bar or restaurant for a meal, like, it's probably not going to destroy your life, right? If you have a bad meal, okay, you know what? Next time I'm not going to go to the Olive Garden. I'm going to go to a better spot, with all due respect to Olive Garden. But when it comes to like, again, this is a marriage, right? And, without hitting too home to anyone, like, if you pick the wrong partner, like, that's not a good, it isn't ideal, right? It happens.
It's not an easy transition.
Right? Exactly. No, it's expensive.
Yeah. So like, you need to think about this a lot less transactionally and more as like, a life partner for your business. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I would encourage brands, like, take time to reflect on, why am I in the market? Like, what are the problems that I'm looking to solve? I think it's very easy to get caught up in distractions when you're talking to 3PLs. They have these robotics. They have 36 locations, right? All the warehouses are really big. But if that doesn't solve your unique problem, or if it doesn't pertain to you, you're better suited not spending time thinking about that. So, one, why are you in the market? What are the problems you're looking to solve? Two, what are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? Like, there are things that, hey, it's great if you have this as well. But again, if they don't have temp-controlled storage, or they don't have EDI capabilities, again, don't get distracted with the sidebars. And I'll build on to one other thing that Matt mentioned is, I think it's easy for brands. Let's just use like an electric bikes brand. And let's say electric e-bikes is, one of the larger providers in the space, largest brands, to look and say, I know they're using XYZ 3PL. Therefore, because I'm an e-bike brand, that's who I need to be with. The reality is that there are 3PLs that are well suited for certain stages of the journey, right? And if you were with their 3PL, you would likely go into a black hole and maybe communicate via tickets, never to get a response, right? There's a better fit for you. Just would be my encouragement.
If I can add quickly to the must-have piece, Ryan, so I think that's important, right? There are the must-haves that you have to have with temp-controlled storage, obviously. If you're selling chocolates, let's not put you in the middle of Arizona, right?
Yeah.
But look for the things that you've gotten used to from your current provider, right? And what, like for example, I had a client who was able to edit the address up until the package stage. And even though you may want to move away, it's probably the right move to move away. Look for those things that you started to take for granted and try and find them everywhere else as well, because that pain will feel particularly sharp if you're used to it and it goes away.
Yep. It's a good call out.
Yeah. I think those are good points, and this is a good transition over to the evaluation phase, because it just like in this conversation, naturally is what happens, right? And so you have to understand a lot of these things, and maybe you don't need to have them super honed in or very pinpointed at the point of search, but it's going to help you filter down everyone that's out there into the people that really can go through. And one of the things that came up a couple times that I think is really important is understanding the stage of your business, the stage of that business, and the stage of businesses that the provider prefers to support. There are tons of providers that are out there that love to be in the startup phase, the pre-launch phase, or in the scaling phase, right? There are tons of providers that don't want to be in that phase at all and only want to do B2B retail, right? And that's not good or bad. It's just the choice that they've made. But their business is set up to operate that way. And therefore, their economics need to match your economics. And so as we think about it, right, and we come back to that equation we were talking about, operations and operational processes was part of that equation. And if that's zero, that's a problem, right? And so you as a brand can evaluate that. But I think just as important, and Ryan, maybe this is important for you to talk about, is the providers are evaluating that back as well, right? Because if your operational processes as a brand aren't super developed, which they may not be because you just haven't been around very long potentially, or you're just not as far in your journey as some well-known house brand, right? Your operational processes may not be to the level that they need to be for the value proposition of a provider to work the way it needs to. And that's a part that I think gets often overlooked or misunderstood. And I think, Ryan, it would be interesting to hear your perspective first on if that take from my side is accurate, where it's like, hey, brands sometimes don't understand the value of their process being matching the robustness of our own. And then Majeed, I would be interested to hear how you navigate through that when you come across that and you need to talk to a brand of like, hey, this is great for everything, but like, we got to fix some things on the home front first for this to work. Otherwise, this isn't.
Yeah, for sure. I think Matt mentioned the term radical transparency, which I think is really key. It's like, it can be tempting to want to end the RFP process and just find a home, right? Hey, if I keep this one thing in the closet, then like it won't cause issues and I can just end this process, transition my inventory and get off to it. But the reality is like all those things are going to be unearthed at some point, right? The fact that you want a Slack channel connected with folks on the ground floor, that's something that you should talk about during the RFP process as an expectation, for example, right?
When do you typically see that come up? Does that kind of start to shed light your first QBR during onboarding? From what you said, it sounds like it's not common that it's coming up in the initial conversations before things are signed.
Yeah, I think frequently we're able to tease that stuff out, but it just goes back to assumptions that we all make, right? Like if I'm with the 3PL that I can show up whenever I want, and I've got a direct line of communication with the inbound manager, right? I call his cell phone. I assume all 3PLs operate in that manner, and I don't even think to bring it up, right? So again, I think just putting all of your assumptions, your expectations, your complexities on the table, so that you can just have like a very objective conversation of this is where you fit in. These are changes that would need to be made. Doesn't mean changes are bad, right? It could be something as simple as Majeed mentioned, like, hey, product needs to be barcoded, right? Like, could we technically inspect each carton? Sure, but like you have to think you're talking about a business that has many, many clients in it with many, many products, and doing it just for you may sound manageable, but multiply it out manyfold and you have an issue.
Yeah, and I would say one additional thing, it probably fits somewhere around team and communication, that and operational processes. Coincidentally, I was actually on a webinar with Wally Shaw, Red Stag CEO, yesterday, and he kind of talked about this a lot. And the message is to visit the warehouse, right? Maybe not on after the first conversation. Right. Maybe that's akin to, going over to, your date's house on the first date. Right. Maybe wait for a couple conversations, but like you absolutely 100% want to visit the actual warehouse or the facility that you'd be operating out of, right? Like, and I know, Red Stag is very keen on keeping bathrooms that are spotless and clean, right? Just like, like we all know Buc-ee's, and a principle to Buc-ee's is having like the cleanest bathrooms. And that when you walk in and you feel good about ordering like fresh food there because you're like, this place is clean, it's orderly, it's nice. So you 100% want to visit the facility to like just see like culturally like how the associates are and like cleanliness, and like of course you also see brands that you recognize there. So that is critical. And I'd say related to that, obviously you're going to be talking to a salesperson during the sales process, but I bet Ryan would also agree that while he's an important part of it, it's important for the brand, for the shipper to meet the account manager, because the salesperson can sell you the dream. Oh yeah, we do this, we're great, we're amazing, and show you a PowerPoint deck that everything is up and to the right and everyone's happy and lots of smiles. But it's the account manager is the one who's actually living the reality with you every day. So if you don't get to meet the person who will actually be running your day-to-day or your account before you sign the agreement, I would absolutely walk away. And I'm a little biased, but I do not like offshore account management. Frankly, I don't even like account management that doesn't sit inside the warehouse that I'm operating out of. So that to me is a must-have or a need-to-have versus a nice-to-have.
Yeah, meet the onboarding team, meet your account manager, meet the GM, right, if you can.
Yeah,
I think those are great
echo
points.
a lot of that, right? I mean, I always equate it for clients. It's, how big of a fish in the pond do you want to be? And there's two stages to that, right? Within the company as a whole, how big of a client do you want to be? Obviously, that gives you leverage in negotiation, those types of things in conversations. When you're big enough to call the CEO when you have a problem, that's nice to have. Maybe not necessary, but it's nice. But it goes beyond that, kind of to what you guys are saying, talking to the account manager. How big of an account are you in that building? How much attention will you get in that building? Sometimes you don't need all the attention. That's totally fine. If you're a brand that has a lot of high-touch processes or specific requirements, you need to make sure that building has the capacity to support you and that you have, the weight to kind of get that attention that you need. What I always tell brands is what we're always trying to avoid. I don't want a year down the line when you get a call from your 3PL for you to roll your eyes before you even answer. Right? That is the worst case scenario, and vice versa, right? Like you don't want your account manager rolling their eyes when you give them a call. You need a relationship where that communication is really on point. And, maybe you're not necessarily excited about it. I'm not going to go that far, but you do want to have productive conversations that feel like you're rowing in the same boat together. And that's so important if you want to actually grow your brand and grow with a 3PL rather than moving every 3 years, right? What I always tell brands is this isn't a irreversible decision, but it's reversible with a lot of pain. And you want to avoid that pain as much as possible. So you want to try and find that right fit early on. That upfront work is so important to making sure you don't have to do that work the next contract's on.
Where would you recommend, if you're talking to a brand, where do they want to be on the parabola, so to speak? Like the way I see it is if you're the largest account, yes, you have leverage, but it also means that you're probably pioneering new processes for them, right? And pioneering new scalability. Whereas the further down you are in the curve, like less leverage, but higher chance, presumably they've been there, done that.
I think that's so dependent on the brand because like I'm going to use some of these larger 3PLs that have started to kind of go after, like they historically have gone after large like brand recognition kind of accounts, and they're kind of going after the mid-size urban startup, right? Those guys have started to create a solution where we've made a box, and if you can fit inside this box, it's very cheap, right? But you have to fit inside the box. And in that case, you are a small fish in a big pond, and there's benefits to that if you can fit inside that. If that's your need and you can keep your processes simple, or at least you have the flexibility to match what they're asking for, awesome, right? That's not going to work for a lot of brands. So many brands probably want to be in the middle, right, where you have enough weight to say, hey, I need some help. Maybe it's not going to be everyone drops everything they're doing to help you, but they will get to it in a timely manner. There is sometimes the advantage of being the biggest guy in the building, right? If you want to have free reign over what's going on, and you have a very strong relationship with that 3PL, which I would say you want to kind of grow into that big fish in the pond would be the ideal situation. Maybe that's not what every brand wants, but that's what I would certainly guide you.
Yeah, I think that's really good insight. Listening to you all talk for the last couple minutes, there's a couple things that stuck out to me. One of them was talking about growth, right? And also in the lens of how do we grow and how do we do that over a period of time with a single provider. And that's great. That's what everyone wants to do and what everyone aspires for. But growth isn't linear, especially when you have two parties involved. And so that's one of the things that I think is okay too when we're talking about radical transparency. You get to the point where things did work and things are good and things start to change, right? Like just like in a regular relationship, talking about that early on is important, because point in time in which the deal is made and the contracts are signed is the point in time in which both parties have the least accurate information about how things are going to go, because nothing's happened yet, right? And so understanding that and understanding it's a two-way street is often important. Before we kind of transition out of this topic, one of the things that I wanted to ask about, how are you approaching sussing out some of that information from the providers to understand beyond just what the rate card says, right? Like, how are you understanding where you are in the pond? Are you the biggest fish? Are you the smallest fish? How are you getting some of that feedback and some of that understanding on the things that are a little bit more qualitative, right? Like, are our operational processes aligned? Are we on the same growth trajectory? Do we value the same type of communication, so on and so forth? But Majeed, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think once you kind of get to your finalist stage, we usually go through 2 rounds of finalists. You got your first cut and your second. When you're past that second cut, visiting the warehouse, I think, is going to reveal so much. If you're not visiting your warehouse, you really don't know what you're buying. And I think that's so important to do. So that's going to be probably the best way, or the easiest kind of easy button to say, am I getting a good fit? But it does go beyond that, right? And it does go, you've got to talk to your sales guy. You got to understand what the values and mission, like critical elements to the 3PL are. But it goes down to talking to the operations, account managers, everything like that. It's about, hey, this is where communicate where you as a brand are looking to go and where you are right now, and see how they respond to that vision that you have. And do they think they can support it? Do they have clients who have gone through a similar journey? And so basically, in a nutshell, when I put together an RFP, I ask so many questions up front of the 3PLs. It's a laundry list. That probably takes longer for them to respond to than the actual pricing sheet, right? And then based on those responses, you should have follow-up questions for the 3PL. You said this. Can we dive into it a little bit deeper? There is genuinely, I don't think, any detail too small when it comes to figuring out, are these guys a right fit? Because you don't know what you don't know, so you have to do your best.
Yeah. Ryan, you're on the other end of that laundry list of questions. And so I think there's 2 pieces I'd like to understand for you. All right. What is that at any point, is there too much? And do you take a look at that and see that as a red flag with a client, right? Maybe high maintenance, whatever it may be. Or what are some of the things that you've seen that when you're getting those questions from someone like Majeed or someone at a brand who's going through this, that have either stood out in a positive way?
I would say number one, I really appreciate when there's a timeline. And I understand that timelines can shift and evolve, but there's clear communication when, hey, it's taking us a little bit longer to get through this than we thought. Here's our revised timeline. So that's number one, have a plan. Number two, certainly appreciate when the data package, and I say data generally, it's not just spreadsheets, right? It can be kind of anecdotal, biographical type stuff too. But when it's dense, provide the information that we need, as Matt and Majeed have said, it's kind of like the first date type of stuff, but like, give me what I need, and then preferably trim out the rest, right? Like, I've seen some RFPs that are 35 pages deep and spread across 17 different files, and that's just very challenging to navigate. So I would say that. Number three would be, I really appreciate when brands or the company facilitating the RFP make themselves available just briefly for questions. Hey, this is our interpretation of it. Is that accurate? That's really key to the process as well. So those are three things that come to mind. And then just building off of what you guys said, WMS demo site visit, it's an opportunity to substantiate the affirmatives that you likely heard during the sales process. It's kind of the trust but verify. And then I think it's totally fair to ask for comps, even if it's anonymized. So frequently, like, we really value our clients' confidentiality, but like, there's still an opportunity to say, hey, we service brands. Here's some example of package volumes, picks per pack, SKU catalog, just some sort of, reference point so they can see where they fit on the curve, right?
One thing, Ryan, you mentioned it briefly, and I don't think we've hit on it enough. Getting a system walkthrough of their WMS or whatever portal you're going to be using on a regular basis, you're spending more time. That's how you're primarily interacting with a 3PL. So getting that walkthrough up front and making sure your team is comfortable with using it is super important.
I think that's a really important piece, right? Oftentimes, especially when we look at brands that are in that startup, that pre-revenue, or even in that scaling phase, you're wearing a lot of hats and you're doing a lot of stuff and you're moving at a million miles an hour, right? Like an hour in that life is a year in the life of a legacy brand. And so it's easy to overlook some of those things, and it's easy to accidentally make the relationship a set it and forget it. But one of the common threads in almost every answer that we've come through is transparency, communication, timely updates. It doesn't necessarily need to be good or bad, but just let me know because then we can figure it out together. One of the things I used to talk about a lot with my team at a prior company to this was we work in operations. It's not a matter of if something is going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen and how do we minimize the impact when it does, right? How do we know which ones bounce? How do we know which ones don't? And the only way that we could ever do that was having really close communication with all the parties that touched, either upstream or downstream from us. And so I think that's a really important takeaway from that as well. One of the things that I wanted to ask the group, for brands, what's one signal from a provider during the initial conversations that it's a partnership that's going to work?
I think, they're comfortable working with the communication style that you are comfortable with. So whether that be phone versus email versus ticketing versus whatever, right? Slack is key. And then the second thing is they come to meetings prepared. It's a simple thing, but it shows that they value your business. If they're repeatedly late to meetings, repeatedly asking you questions you've already answered, to me, that tells you you're probably not high on their pecking order relative to other brands they're talking to.
Or internal communication may have some breakdowns, which is also a red flag, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I would say that if the 3PL is willing to tell you no, and it might not be no, we don't want to work with you, but at our event earlier this week, the keynote speaker, one of their missions as a company, his last company was, I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of say yes, but then like figure out what we need to do to make it work, right? And maybe the ultimate decision is after you've huddled as a team is no, we can't do that. But like partnership is willing to make things work and work towards solutions. Is probably a better way of saying that. So, an example here would be like if you as the brand, as the customer, bring them a highly customized and efficient unboxing experience, right? The box comes in 13 parts and all these cord inserts and, all this stuff. A great partner might tell you no and show you a more scalable way to do that, right? An order taker or a transactional relationship might say yes to everything, but that true partner is someone who's going to protect your margins, right? So it's not no because we don't want to do it. It's no because there are alternatives or options that are better for everyone.
Someone who's just a vendor will say yes and then charge you for it. A partner will find a better solution.
Yeah, I think that I wanted to touch on that because I spent a brief period of time on the brand side, and we were scaling through acquisition very quickly. And so, oftentimes, one of the most important pieces of information that you're going to give a provider is how much storage space do you need and what's your throughput going to look like. And we didn't know that because on Monday, I may think that there are two brands in the pipeline that we're going to close on Friday, and those two might not close, and there may be two different ones with completely different profiles. And the provider we were talking with at the time said no. And that was one of the most valuable conversations I've ever had. But it's kind of a different play on the yes and. They said no, but. So right now we can't do this. But if you're able to get to this spot or that spot, that's what success would look like for a customer coming in, right? So they wanted to work with us, but they cared about our margins and they cared about our business and their own business and other customers enough to tell us, no, not right now. Here's how we get there. And that was value that they gave back to us. So that would have been one of those things that was like, hey, this is a partnership that if and when the timing is right, it's going to work. And so I think that's a good takeaway. What's a red flag that a brand should look out for?
I think kind of the first thing that came to mind is there's always going to be issues when you're working with a 3PL, right? Like you're never going to get it perfect. Something's going to go wrong. And that cuts both ways. And so really, from both a 3PL and from a brand, once a problem is identified and solved, that problem shouldn't come up again, right? Like solve it once, fix it, let it be done. And that goes for if a 3PL tells a brand, hey, you need to change this, or vice versa, brand telling the 3PL.
Awesome. Matt, what's one red flag that brands should look out for?
Ryan made a great point about being late to meetings, being unprepared. I mean, there's literally an RFP that I'm working on right now where one of the 3PLs, their salesperson showed up 3 minutes late, was not apologetic, was just not prepared, seemed frazzled, and like they might be great I know they're great operators because I've worked with them before, but like it's like showing up late to a date, right? You know, at least for me, I did that a couple of times and never got a second date out of that, right? And it's not because I'm a bad person; things happen, but you know, you need to be careful. But you know, just quickly, one other thing I would add to that is pricing. Obviously, this is a little bit later in the RFP process, but you know, I find that if a 3PL's pricing proposal is so complicated that you need you know, a master's in Excel, you know, to sort of navigate it, and you know, you need to be a wizard to calculate like basic fulfillment cost per order. That to me is a massive red flag. Complexity is often where 3PLs hide their margin. I think Majeed had mentioned earlier that vendors just sort of nickel and dime you. So, you know, if they can't explain their commercial model simply, then, you know, they're absolutely going to nickel and dime you later.
And it's great to ask them to quote some examples, give them 5 shipments, right? Here's 5 scenarios. Do you mind just, you know, showcasing how this works out?
Yeah, I think that's those both are really good points. I asked you all if you could stop from refrain from plugging if you could, but I'm going to take this opportunity to say, hey, if you come across a situation where you need a master's of Excel, if you come across a situation where somebody can't give you you know, the rating out a couple shipments and figuring out how it looks like, let us know. That's part of what we built with Slotted, and part of how, you know, things can move from Matt to myself, or Majeed can also help with that as well. But there are solutions that are out there. And I think a lot of this, you hear RFP, you hear a lot of the things that we talked about today. And if you're a brand that's earlier on in your life cycle or your stage, you may think that these are things that are overly complex or overly daunting for you. And they're you know, reserved for much larger shippers. That's not the case. It really is an activity that can help you figure out exactly how to protect your margin. A small error from a 3PL on someone who's shipping 100,000 orders a month is recoverable. A small error, a quote unquote small error to that 3PL on someone who's shipping 100 orders a month could be the difference between having a business and not, especially if that's something in the retail space. What is one thing that the brand can do to stand out to a provider before that first conversation even hits, right? What is something that a brand can do to stick out ahead of everyone and really say, hey, I'm someone worth your time to talk to, regardless of the size that I am? And maybe, Ryan, a natural place to start is with you.
Cool. Yeah, I would just reiterate, reflect on your needs, really distill down, you know, this is who I am, those first state type questions, right? These are the pain points or problems I'm looking to solve. And I would also just encourage, like, in the same way it's bad practice for in my opinion, a 3PL not to review a brand's website and do a bit of self-exploration, I would also encourage a brand to do a little bit of a deep dive, see where the warehouse locations are, right? Very frequently, you'll see some emails that come through that are info at, and then they've listed out 500 3PLs that they sent the same copy-paste email to. So distill it down, reflect on your needs, and would encourage just like some initial screening via client references or just website review.
Great answer. Matt or Majeed, anything that you can think of that brands can do to help stand out when that first inbound or that right before that first conversation with the provider?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of adding to what Ryan said, it's really just get your data in order, right? And to put it very simply, right? You don't want to overwhelm everyone with data. You don't need 17 different spreadsheets, but you do need to make sure that all the different pieces of what a 3PL needs is properly included early on. It just reduces the amount of back and forth you're going to have. You don't want a 3PL saying, hey, what are the dimensions of your SKUs? They should already have that. These types of kind of basic things let you know, lets a 3PL know that you're serious about finding them. You spend that time organizing the data.
Yeah. Evaluate yourself before you evaluate them, right? Mm-hmm. Like the biggest mistake the brands make is asking who is the best 3PL near me or in Chicago, or who my fellow founder friend uses for their, company, instead of asking like, who is the best 3PL for my specific data profile, right? So like before you take a single meeting, you need a crystal clear document of like your SKU velocity, your return rates, peak volumes, all the things that we've discussed. Because if you don't know exactly who you are, there's no way you can evaluate if a partner is actually built for you.
Yeah, I think
that's especially if you're struggling to find a partner that will take you on. Again, having that data package will substantiate them to say, I believe in this brand. Let's take a roll of the dice on.
Yeah, I think those are really great points. You got to know who you are as a brand first. That's first and foremost. You have to have your own house in order. And then you know where your opportunities are, you know where your warts are, you know where there is potential challenges that you may provide to a provider. And being radically transparent about that helps you get in front of and deeper with the right people. And ultimately that will lead to the best overall relationship, overall cost, overall service, and overall experience for everyone involved. Talk to the right providers, make sure you're going deep in the evaluation to the depth that matches your complexity and what you need, and then make sure that the partnership works for both sides. And that's the only way that you're going to start from a really strong foundation versus playing catch up before the first order ever goes out. Matt, Majeed, Ryan, I really, really appreciate you all putting time into this today. If people want to understand more, connect with you all to either help find the right people to talk to or go deeper in the process, or have questions about fulfillment in general, how can they reach you? Majeed, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so obviously there's an interest form on Shipware's website, if that's the kind of easiest way to do it. My email, majeed.peffley@Shipware, very easy to find. And obviously I think for everyone here, probably easiest is just to DM me on LinkedIn, because I'm probably the only Majeed Peffley on the internet. So I'm pretty easy to Google.
And similarly for me, my email is matt, M-A-T-T, @thirdperson.co. I'm also fairly active on LinkedIn. Follow me there, connect with me there, DM, and would love to chat. And thank you, Joe, for having me.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I'm not as popular on LinkedIn as Matt, but you can DM me there or send me an email, ryanm@redstack.com, or similar to, as Majeed said, check out our website and fill out an inbound form. But certainly appreciate being included here. I'd put my name by every single person on here as good people to work with. And I think, we believe in helping out brands, helping out 3PLs, ultimately just trying to help people find the right, whether that's us or somebody else.
Awesome. And I can attest to that from the interactions that we've had with you. So appreciate all of you being here. I'm Joe McIntyre. Like I said, I'm the general manager of Slotted. We appreciate you coming on today. If you have questions, you can't find the only Majeed Peffley on LinkedIn, or can't remember exactly how to get in touch with anyone else, reach out to us and let us know. If you're having questions about fulfillment, we're here to be a resource for you, as well as the other people on this call. And if you are knowing you need to find a fulfillment partner, knowing that you need to find someone who's the right fit for you, but not sure how to go about it, check out Slotted. It's a great place to start. We bring that structure and that clarity for both the providers and the brands. Appreciate you guys joining, and we'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.